Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TIFF by Lightbox. My name is Brad Dean. I'm the director of the TIFF Cinematheque, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's screening of Anocha Suwichakornpong's Mundane history, and it's going to be preceded by her short film, Graceland. To begin, we'd like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are very grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. On behalf of TIFF, I'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, our public supporters, Ontario Creates, and the Canada Council for the Arts. And we'd also like to thank Zoomer Radio and Classic FM Radio, our program sponsors at the Cinematheque. We'd also like to take a moment to thank our donors and members for supporting TIFF's year-round programming, educational, and outreach initiatives possible. So I hope many of you were at the screening yesterday by the time it gets dark. This is kind of wrapping up our short retrospective of Anocha's films. I think I'd said yesterday, I think she's really one of the most exciting young voices in international cinema today. We're really thrilled to have her here back with us again. Please welcome Anocha Suwichakornpong.
Thank you, Brad. I also I wanted to thank you for pronouncing my names really well. And you didn't like verify or check with me. So thank you for that. Thank you everyone for being here this afternoon for the screenings of two films of, the short film called Graceland, which was actually my thesis, master thesis as a film student. And so that film is 17 minutes long, and in many ways it kind of set me on this path of becoming a filmmaker. At the time, even though I was a film student, I really wasn't sure if I could go on to make films after I graduated. Luckily, I think Graceland did reasonably well, and then it gave me confidence to start making films, like feature films, and producing and writing, and this is what is my main preoccupation these days. My life is really immersed in film. And Mundane History is my first feature. I shot in 2008 in the aftermath of the coup d'etat that took place in 2006. And it was when, I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, but it was, I went back to Thailand after I graduated. I went to film school in New York. And then there was a coup d'etat in 2006 that really changed my view of my perspective on life, and it made me question my relationship to the society, to Thailand, and the Thai politics and history. And then I made this film, Mundane History, that in many ways was a kind of an exploration of the social politics and of that particular time. So it's been more than 10 years already. So this is all I have to say now, and I'll be back after the film for discussion. Thank you.
So again, I'll start out with asking a couple questions, and then we'll open up to the audience. I just wanted to start, you talked about it being very politically motivated. I was just wondering what the reception of the film was like, and how Thai audiences, would they recognize the politics in the film when they saw it?
So it screened in Bangkok the first time as an opening film of a film festival in Bangkok. And I remember people were quite surprised. And at the time, I shot in 2008, and it started to travel. But that screening in Bangkok was actually if I remember correct. Yeah, it was also in 2008. So like a month or two after the world premiere in Busan Film Festival in Korea. And it was kind of, I would say it's, that at that point, a lot of people were still supporting the military. And I mean, to some degree, that is still happening. But back then, it was just when, like I said, there was a coup d'etat in 2006. That was really like a very, that was very much supported by the urban middle class people. And so when I screened this film, also there was some footage of the protests, the yellow shirts, the so-called yellow shirts protesters. They were essentially like people who were calling for the military to take over, and they were like staunch royalists. So like and so I think it kind of, in a way, people didn't know what to make of it, but I'm saying that was like the very first screening, and then maybe in 2009, after the film started to travel to more festivals, and it had a theatrical release in Thailand, like even almost a year later, that was something had shifted in the meantime, and yeah, I felt like since then there have been a lot more political films made, but not so much when I made this film. Yeah.
So you didn't have to deal with anything with censorship or anything
Oh,
like
okay.
that?
Yes, I didn't have to deal with it myself, but like I said, it was an opening film of a festival, so it was submitted to the censorship board by the festival organizers, and then I heard that it was almost banned, but yeah, somehow it wasn't banned, but I was given like a 20 plus rating certificate. It's like a film classification, and then for this film, then you actually have to be like over 20 to see it in Thailand, which is nuts because you can vote, but you cannot see this film. How does that work? Yeah. Yeah, but also like I didn't know the reason. There was no reason given why they wanted to impose this. Actually, the highest rating you could get, 20 plus, you have to show your ID card. With the other ratings, it was kind of like, they're like 15, 7, 18, kind of, they function more as suggestive ratings. So you don't have to show your ID or anything, but with 20 plus, you have to show your ID card. Then the festival director then told me that it was, the reason they gave, and the official reason they gave, was the male full frontal nudity. But who knew? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know.
Well, I think I mentioned, I think yesterday in the introduction, I think your films make these very strong formal choices. And I was just wondering if you could talk about how you approach your films from that formal perspective and the way form and content work together, and does one come before the other, or how does that relationship work for you?
I mean, this was my first feature, and so it was the first time that I was moving from like a short format to a feature, and so I had like a script. I shot according to the script, and but in terms of the aesthetics, or like the work that I was doing with my friend, who's the guy who shot this film. We went to film school together, so we actually did a lot of prep work before we went into production. We would discuss, like the stylistic choices that were going into cinematography. I was interested in this. I wanted to experiment because it was like really my first feature, and I wanted to do kind of some crazy thing and just not to stick to the rules, the conventions of filmmaking so much. So I was.
Well, you don't stick to the rules in any of your films in a way.
But
So.
this was like, the first time I felt like, okay, in terms of shooting, you can have like tripod, stick shoot, and then handheld, and I wanted to mix them up in like a given scene, to like switch from one to the other, but with some some rules actually. So there would be like, for instance, because the main character, he's in bed pretty much the whole time. The challenge was how to shoot that in interesting ways, because we would not be able to move with him. And probably the most obvious way would be to like just put a camera. I mean, I don't know, like Asian cinema, it has this kind of slow, it's like you just observe. But I didn't want to do that. I said to my friend, let's be punk about it. We should like do handheld, even though the character is just in bed. We should be able to move the camera the way we wanted to. But then we would use the other characters, the secondary characters who come in and out of the room, and explore this relationship between their movement and the main character who's in bed. And also the house, I saw that as one of the main characters. So yeah, that's why like some of the shots I envisioned them to be seen as kind of like the perspective of the house looking at these people. Yeah, so that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I think the handheld also, it almost brings you closer to the character in a way, because it kind of breathes with the character or something. It's almost as the static shots. If it was more static, it might feel colder or more distant. So it almost feels like it makes it more intimate in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the camera crew were very confused because, I mean, they were really questioning me and my friend. We were like new and like, young filmmakers, and they were like, how would this work? We were, shooting this scene, but, like a scene is made out of many shots. And we already shot one already, on like handheld, but then we would shoot the other angle on tripod. And they were like, you would not be able to cut this together. And I'm like, well, it's okay. I wanted to try. Yeah. But, yeah. So, and also actually the very big part of the process, which we haven't talked about, is the editing, of course. Yeah. We really spent like I spent a long time with my editor on deconstructing the script, and kind of really we took it apart and kind of assembled it back together. Yeah, because actually in the script it was linear. Yeah.
And did you work with your editor before shooting, or was it just after you'd shot everything you start working with your editor? What stage did they come in?
Well, he came in after we wrap. Yeah, but I worked with him before on the short that you saw before, Mundane History. That was the first time I worked with him, and we developed like a very good working relationship. So I wanted to work with him again, and so in the beginning we were editing according to the script. So it was kind of like a linear, and it stayed like that for maybe 2-3 months, and then at one point I was like thinking, oh, the film it was okay, but I felt it could that it was something that was missing. And then to go back a little bit, I based the script on a short story I had written years before, and on the short story it was like a kind of almost like a diary entry of this person who was writing in the first narration, like the I, and a kind of like stream of consciousness way of like describing his environment and his relationship with his father. And it was only like a 1-page entry, so kind of very short story, and I based the whole script on that short story. And in that process, because writing a feature script, you need like a lot more like secondary characters, and it became a little bit more conventional. And so when we were editing, I kept going back to the origin, like the original idea I had for the story, which would be more fluid and not the time function in a different way. So yeah, one day it just happened that my editor and I were like, I said to him, maybe we don't have to start the film in the beginning, Actually, could go to ask quote, that famous quote, yeah, like the film is. Can you want to?
Yeah, every film has a beginning, middle, and end, just not necessarily in that order.
Yeah, so that sentence popped into my head, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should start the film with another scene that was not the scene I had it in the script, and that was like the beginning of a very long, laborious process of this deconstructing the narrative and kind of trying to look at it in a different way.
And so the ending then was not planned to be that way because it's such a powerful ending.
Actually, the ending. The ending came later. It was not. It was when I was editing that the ending came to me, and then I also, I couldn't time that to be during the production. It came to me towards the end of the shooting period, but because we had to like look for someone who we could get permission to film, and the hospital that would allow us to film. So by this time, and then the shooting ended. I started editing with my editor, and then we were able to find someone who gave us the trust to film this. And by this time, my cinematographer had left because we couldn't keep him waiting. Yeah, but in the end, it was shot by a nurse. I know it's kind of crazy, but because I didn't, because there was complication, and this I could, there would actually only one person was allowed to go in with a camera, and so this person was just waiting on standby, and then I had like, also that hospital was not even in Bangkok, it was like further away, and I received a phone call, and my crew was like, sorry, but there's, now they told me that I can't, they're not letting me into the room, the surgery room. And I'm like, oh my God. And then he said, but the nurse took the camera. And I'm like, no, how is that going to work? And they're like, he was like, well, sorry, there's nothing I could do. They said no. And the nurse just took a camera. Yeah.
It's great camera
I know.
work.
So actually my cinematographer friend, he's like, he's quite bitter about it because that's always the shot that people was asking about in Q&A, and he's like, I didn't shoot it.
And it feels like the rest of the film too.
Yeah, and he actually, I mean, bless him, he's a very good friend of mine, but he would always like, give a lot of credit to like who the person who shot this, because he felt that if it was him, maybe he wouldn't even be able to do it so well, because he would be like so kind of like, it's so much about filmmaking, and he's like, probably maybe not thinking too much about how long this could go on, like maybe he would like call cut at some point. But this person who was a nurse had like, they didn't care about that, so they just kept filming. And also being a nurse, like I think they would know where the procedure, the procedure really well, where the baby would, be moved at, and so they were able to capture this.
I wonder about that because the way it moves with it.
Yeah.
It really, it feels like it knows where the camera knows where it's going.
Yeah. So my cinematographer friend was like, I might have fainted myself or something, but yeah.
Were you looking for a cesarean section, or was that a happy accident?
It was a happy accident, because we were, like I said, we were waiting for this woman to give birth, and my crew was on standby for like weeks, and then suddenly there was a complication, and that's why they had to perform a cesarean. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's like the beginning. It looked as if it was an operation of the main character, and then the baby came out. Yeah. I hadn't planned that. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can take some audience questions now. If you just raise your hand, and we'll pass the microphone around. Here, and then we'll go up front after.
Hi, you mentioned earlier that the coup kind of changed your perspective on the culture and politics. And can you talk a bit about that and your decision to go back and pursue your filmmaking in your country?
Yeah, I was going back anyway. I was just going to the States to do a master's degree in film, because I hadn't studied film, kind of filmmaking up to that point. So I knew that I was just going there for education and going back to Thailand. So when I went back in, like I say, in 2005, I was like, they didn't really think much about the politics and what, because at that time there was no crisis yet. It really started into. I mean, it was kind of leading up. They started to have like street protests, but it was not like something that would be like defining the country that it is like the way it is now. But then 2006 with the coup d'état that kind of uprooted the civilian government, democratically elected prime minister, who was also, I mean, I should say that he was a very controversial figure, kind of Berlusconi, self-made billionaire, and was kind of mired in corruption, but still he was ousted while he was actually in New York, about to address like the UN assembly of some sort. I remember that because he was away, and then suddenly there was a coup, and then people were like going out on the streets, like supporting the military. Most of the it was a very popular coup in that regard, and I felt like I didn't understand the like how my reality. It was just like the whole world was very different. I mean, for me then I started to really look back and going back in time about how did we become like this, what led to this, going back in time to the 70s, and I started to see like repeated patterns in like really the old power who wouldn't let go, and like the power structure of the society. And I mean, when I made this film, I was in a very weird place. I felt like I couldn't really communicate openly with people in my surroundings. Like they were by and large supporting the military. So it was a very lonely but also like frustrating experience, and I wanted to make a film about also patriarchy, right? I mean, also going back and living in society, and I felt like for the first time I was confronted with this issue, and I didn't feel that before. Up until that point, I was like a student, and it's when going into like a professional world, it was kind of like a eye-opening experience for me. Yeah.
And next question, it's right here.
Well, I think you actually partly answered the question I was about to ask, because I was interested to hear from you the link between the political context you talk about, your shock about it, and the mundane story you talk about. So you brought the word patriarchy and the idea that you needed to sort of step out or step away and get into a specific story or a mundane story. Could you maybe expand more about this choice of that storytelling in particular? Why this unfortunate story of this young man, about the mundane story?
I mean, first of all, about the title, maybe I could talk a little bit about because the Thai title is different from the English title. So the Thai title is Chao Nok Kajok, which means sparrows, as birds, those little birds, and English title Mundane History. But I just say the sparrow in Thai, this kajok, no kajok, this kind of bird, it has double meanings. So on one hand, when you say something is kajok, it's actually a derogatory term. It means literally, it means something that's very commonplace, like very ordinary, but it has like a negative connotation. So it's like almost as if there's anything that is commonplace that is kind of like it doesn't have much value. But then it's also the name of the birds, so. And then I learned that actually, because the two meanings are interconnected, because in Thailand, you can see sparrows everywhere. Nobody would really be interested or care much about the sparrows because they're like pigeons, I guess, in Europe or in North America. Pigeons are like everywhere. They're like rats or whatever. So for me, then when I realized that the two meanings are connected in the way that like because the birds are everywhere, so they're not like important, so people wouldn't keep them as pets, and no one cares about them. And so the gajok as one meaning, which is the bird, and the other one is like commonplace, ordinary, nothing significant, like essentially the same in its origin. And then when I was thinking of the English title for the film, like I was like the word mundane and history, because I felt like these two words, I guess I was thinking more of like the juxtaposition of the two words, like mundane, points to something that is like very like quotidian everyday life, and history is something that is like a huge, like a grand narrative. And I wanted to be able to combine the two concepts, but maybe with more emphasis on the everyday life, the mundane, the quotidian. And so, but yeah, so that, is how I came up with the titles. But the story of the narrative of the film itself is, I mean, there is this family. There's like the man who's who has become paraplegic, and but also there's another house. They like the servants' quarter, and this is like the I wanted to make that become the main narrative of a film in another way. So it's not, yeah. So it's like, I wanted to talk about the class structure of Thailand, because it exists, even though it's very subtle. But up until that point, I felt like I didn't really see it so much in films, or like or read much about that in novels in Thailand. So I wanted to make a film about it, the class division. But yeah, and this family in a way is is an affluent, like kind of bourgeois, but it's it's kind of in its last days. It's dying. Yeah, but then the function of the nurse, well, the caretaker character, is like a new class of like kind of like a new new class of people in Thailand, I think, who are getting bigger and bigger, and with political consciousness, and yeah, like I think is in a way the Pan character, the caretaker, is someone who is able to go back and forth between like the main house and the servants' quarter. Yeah, but yeah, he's a new class. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we have any more questions. I have one more maybe before we go. You started out making shorts, and then you've made a couple features, but I think for the audience, you've made also a lot of shorts along the way as well, and continue to. And coming up, you have more short projects, more feature projects. Maybe you could talk a little about working between those two mediums.
Yeah, with feature films, they take much longer time, and then so when I have the opportunity to work on short films, I don't think of shorts as necessarily being like a stepping stone to a feature. They I think they work in very different ways, and so yeah, when I have the opportunity to work on shorts, whether it be like a commission project or something that I'm interested in doing myself, then I just take that opportunity, and it's a freer form. There's not much. I mean, there is no like nothing you have to think about in terms of commercial prospect of the film, because it's like shots don't sell or whatever, so it's like really great to be able to sketch out some ideas and even like, yeah, do more like experimental things with the shorts. But actually, I do that with picture as well. I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, I wish I could do more. I mean, you're saying this, but I feel like God. I feel like I could do more, but I haven't been able to do that. I also teach, as you know, and
But you also have a lot of shorts too. So
yeah, but I haven't. Yeah, but I want. I wish. I think I could do more, and I haven't really. I think what's the last shot I made? It was like even like maybe a few years ago. I feel like yeah. I mean, I can be more prolific, and I mean, not that I have to be, but I feel like I want to do it. It's just I haven't been able to.
well, you have more projects coming up, both short and feature. So
Yes. Yeah.
we'll see them soon.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I just would really like to thank you for joining us here this weekend. And
Thank you. Yeah.
and hopefully we'll have you back again soon with a new short or feature.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.